I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story and welcome to Friday. Hey, tonight we're going to start out with a glimpse of the future. You probably know the existing I-5 bridges across the Columbia River, kind of old, definitely need to be redone, rebuilt. It's a huge project, but one that now includes pictures, designs of what the new bridge or bridges could look like, and that is our big story tonight. It doesn't matter if you live in Portland or Vancouver or Eastern Oregon for that matter. Odds are pretty good that you've traveled across the Interstate Bridge that holds I-5 up across the Columbia River. It's not what you would call beautiful, but it is beautiful that because there's two side by side, that they continue to stand and allow us to zip from one state to the other. Well, at least outside of rush hour. The design of the existing bridge is something called a steel vertical lift truss. The truss parts are the triangles that you see throughout the bridge. That's what gives it the strength to hold all of our cars and trucks. I wanted to tell you that because we're going to be looking at some different bridge designs tonight. There are several options out now that could replace the existing interstate bridges. So it's good to know the differences. Ready to go bridge shopping? Let's see if you can find one you like. The group working on replacing the existing bridges released computer animations of several options. The first is called an extra-dosed bridge. It's a cross between a girder bridge and a cable-stayed bridge. A girder bridge is a common bridge where the decking that you drive on is built on top of horizontal supporting beams. Those beams sit on piers that support the entire thing. The cables run between towers and the bridge deck. One advantage of this design is relatively low towers. They'd stay out of the airspace of the local airports, and it would only be one level. A second option is called a fin-back bridge. It's similar to that first one, the extra dose, but the cables are not exposed. They're held inside a concrete housing. It also has low support towers. This is a concrete bridge, a third option. It's similar to what we have now on Interstate 205. Here's another option, a steel bridge. It has a wider profile at the piers. It's much lighter and would use smaller piers though. The downside, they say, is that you have to paint it and keep up on maintenance on the coatings of the bridge deck. It's cheaper in the beginning, but about the same cost as the others in the long run, according to the experts. Another possibility, a two-level structure with the highway on top and bike and transit underneath. It's considered a clean design. It's much more narrow than one of the single-level bridges, but the views are not great if you're on the lower level. And finally, this is something called a movable span bridge. Some of these bridges pivot, but this one would go up and down. It will have large concrete counterweights to move that segment up, but you wouldn't see them. They'd be housed within the towers. So what do you think? Pretty cool, huh? Did you find a design that you like? Let us know. You're going to have to live with it for 100 years, so I hope you really like it. So think about it and then let us know. In the meantime, there's the issue of how this is all going to be paid for. The state of Washington is committed to paying $1 billion. Another $1 billion plus will be raised through tolling, which then leaves the federal government and Oregon. Oregon plans to match Washington, adding $1 billion to the bridge plan, but there's a little problem there. The legislation to do that has not yet been passed. It will likely come in the form of some sort of bonds, but at the moment, you may have heard, everything in Salem's on hold. The Republicans are boycotting the Senate, and without a quorum with the Republicans, the Senate can't do any work. And the final legislation that will guarantee Oregon's contribution is on hold with everything else. I talked today with Democrat Elizabeth Steiner. She's one of the co-chairs of the Budget Committee, which is called Ways and Means.
If they don't come back, then it's potential for us to miss that important window. Without federal funding, we cannot do this bridge. So it's very important that Oregon have its act together and our Republican colleagues come back very soon so that we can have a public process to get this and other important bills moving.
Does that mean that if the session adjourns without the Republicans coming back, that the bridge project is in serious jeopardy?
It's certainly a concern. I wouldn't say that it's dead, and I wouldn't say that we have a definitive plan for it not to be dead, but it certainly reduces our options and hampers our ability to apply for federal funding in a timely fashion.
So, something to think about. Both states hope the federal government will kick in at least a couple of $1 billion. The window to apply for those funds, though, that opens in middle of June, which adds pressure to all sides as the walkout goes on and on and on. By the way, speaking of Washington, the state secretary of transportation of Washington not happy with his new budget, and his governor, Jay Inslee, agrees. Lawmakers gave the Washington Department of Transportation $700 million per year for maintenance. But, sounds like a lot, but it's $300 million less than the Secretary of Transportation for Washington said he needs. He talked about it yesterday when he met with others to discuss the Interstate Bridge.
While we are committed to projects like the IBR, which indeed is primarily a preservation project and a safety project, we are going to see statewide a lessening in the quality of and safety of our transportation system if the legislative direction continues as it has been. It's unfortunate, but the reality is there are too many things to do and not enough money to do them with.
So that's kind of a happy thought, eh? Think about that as you drive Washington's highways. By the way, Governor Inslee is quoted in the Columbian newspaper as saying, look, this is a chronic problem of legislators wanting blue ribbon events for new projects instead of maintaining bridges and roads. Now, legislators are not taking that laying down. The legislative leader said lawmakers needed to spread projects around to get support from both Democrats and Republicans in the Washington legislature. Let's stick with transportation for just a minute. TriMet voted to increase fares on the MAX and buses starting next year. It's the first time they've raised fares in more than a decade. Prices have stayed the same since 2012. But this week, TriMet's board decided it is time for an increase, and it's going to take effect in January. The increase is 30 cents per ride. Right now, you pay $2.50 for up to 2.5 hours or $5 for the entire day. Next year, that price goes up to $2.80 for 2.5 hours, and the day pass will be $5.60. Honored citizens and youth pass prices are going up as well. But if you buy a monthly pass, which costs $100 now, the price will not go up. It's going to stay the same. TriMet says inflation made it necessary to raise prices, but a lot of folks are not happy with that, especially because a substantial portion of TriMet riders are people who have lower incomes and people with disabilities,
which will result in decreased ridership, increased traffic congestion, increased air pollution, and hasten climate chaos. Your studies and their testimony spoke to the huge equity and climate justice issues underlying today's decision. A fare increase will pose hardship for many low-income, working poor, elderly, and disabled riders. My partner, who uses transit daily for work, noted how illogical it is to keep passes at the same rate while charging more for those who barely scrape by and can't afford an annual or monthly pass up front.
Our budget for the next fiscal year does have a fare increase that will help fund the first big package of improvements for Forward Together service plan. These are improvements to provide to you, our riders, especially those with low and limited incomes, better connections for more people to reach more jobs and places throughout our region. It calls for buses arriving more often and earlier and later times in the day.
TriMet says they want to increase service over the next few years and that their operating costs have gone up in the past decade. At the same time, fewer people are riding and using transit. TriMet says they only have about 62% of the riders they had before the pandemic. The numbers are starting to rebound. They say they gave about 4.8 million rides in April. That's up 15% over last year, and that's with a 3-week construction disruption on the MAX line. Last year, they had to reduce service on several bus lines. They're struggling to find workers, and they had to increase pay in order to try and hire more people. In the end, TriMet's board voted 6-1 that yes, they needed to increase the fares. Now, they do have a discount program in place for people with low incomes, but people at the meeting said it just wasn't a very good solution.
And I know that claims have been made that discounts will be available for low-income individuals and families. And to that I respond that the poor are not circus animals. We shouldn't have to jump through hoops on your command to access basic services and needs. And you may not know this, but it can be a cumbersome process to access discount programs, which often require filling out confusing paperwork, traveling across town to a benefits office, and waiting in long lines. And these requirements are especially challenging for those who speak other languages, and those who already have limited access to transportation, and those who are time poor due to having to work long hours or juggle multiple jobs.
Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler also asked TriMet not to raise fares. He's been championing for the last few weeks to reduce things like city taxes and fee increases. It's his attempt to stop people, he says, from moving away from Portland. He wrote, "While I appreciate and understand the stated reasoning behind the proposed increases, I firmly believe many Portlanders today are being priced out. Although individual rate increases may seem minor, the collective impact of tax, utility rate, and fee increases by multiple regional public and private agencies results in financial hardship for many Portlanders." Many people opposed to the fare hike argue the public transit should just be free. They believe transportation is a public service, much like the library or the fire department. It is an idea that's taking hold in some cities. In 2019, Kansas City, Missouri made its buses and streetcars free to the public, and so did Worcester, Massachusetts. And starting later this summer, Washington, D.C. is making its bus rides free. San Francisco and Denver, both working on pilot programs where transit rides would be free for some riders in some cases. At least one TriMet board member said he does like that idea, but doesn't think it would work here. What do you think? Should public transit be free to riders but funded with tax dollars, or should TriMet raise rates and try to improve service? Or maybe something else? We want to hear your thoughts. Send them to us, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. Still to come on The Story, you had a lot to say about a man who died waiting more than 30 minutes for an ambulance to arrive after he was hit by a car in Portland. We're answering your questions about why it took so long and why AMR, the ambulance company, is struggling to get enough staffing. Stick around. Last night, we told you about two big developments in the homeless crisis in Portland. First, the city of Portland has settled a federal lawsuit by agreeing to keep sidewalks clear of tents and other campsites. The plaintiffs argued that the city broke the Americans with Disabilities Act by allowing tents to block the sidewalks. The settlement stipulates that the city will need to prioritize removing campsites that block the sidewalk. Also, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler is proposing a new city law to ban camping on sidewalks and all public right-of-ways from 8 in the morning until 8 at night. We'll hear more about the proposal next week at the city council meeting. But you all had a lot to say about the new developments. We got this voicemail from William.
Now we're going to put people who don't take down their tents on the sidewalk in jail. Yeah, that's going to work really, really good. And we're going to give them fines to people who have no money. Well, that's a great idea.
Thank you, William. Beth wrote, the city wants to wrongly apply the ADA to get rid of poor people. The ADA was never intended to be used against homeless people, many of whom are disabled themselves. What does the city plan to do with the people they sweep, fine, or jail, especially those with mobility-related and other disabilities? Steve was also skeptical, writing, why are we allowing camping on sidewalks at all? How is preventing camping from 8 in the morning till 8 p.m. going to solve this huge problem? Allowing people to set up camp after 8 p.m. and then spend the night is not a solution at all. I don't get what the mayor's thinking on this one. But viewer GP is on board. My thoughts on the Wheelers camping ban about bleep time. I guess you can fill in the blank for yourself with whatever your favorite word would be there. We'll be watching the City Council meeting next week to see whether commissioners adopt the ADA settlement and whether they adopt Mayor Wheeler's camping ban. And you can let us know what you think about the proposals as well. Also last night, we brought you an awful story of a man hit in his wheelchair, hit and eventually killed by a driver who took off. A rescue crew from the fire department, they rushed over, they were there in minutes. But the man died waiting for an ambulance. AMR took 32 minutes to get there. A lot of you had questions about that as well. Reporter Evan Watson, who uncovered that story through public records requests, joins us now with some answers.
Pat, the first question is from David. Why is there a shortage of ambulances? What's stopping AMR from staffing up to meet demand? Well, AMR says it's hard to hire paramedics right now, and Multnomah County requires 2 paramedics for every ambulance crew. The company says it's trying all sorts of strategies to entice and retain paramedics, but as the volume of 911 calls has increased in recent years, AMR's staffing levels have slightly decreased. That brings us right to another question. What are ambulance paramedics paid? I saw some commenters say paramedics get minimum wage, and that's not exactly true. Paramedics have higher levels of training than other first responders such as EMTs, and their salaries reflect that to an extent. Multnomah County's contract with AMR sets a pay scale for paramedics based on years of experience. That scale starts at $70,000 per year, rising to $97,000 per year with 12 years served. And then question 3. Do ambulances take this long to get to the West Hills and the Pearl? Is the response the same around the city regardless of location? AMR has ambulance crews stationed throughout the county, and response time requirements are generally the same no matter where you are. The county standard is that ambulance crews should arrive to emergency calls within 8 minutes, at least 90% of the time. There can be some exceptions, but for an urban county like this one, it's mostly uniform. The system is complex. For example, ambulance crews can be stuck waiting in hospital bays before being cleared to go back out on calls. That's another issue. But whatever the reason, data shows ambulance response times are falling off, and increasingly, there are no ambulances available when someone calls 911.
All right, thanks, Evan. Great stuff. When we come back, it's time for the Rose Festival. Who doesn't love that? We're going into the KGW Vault, back in time to the crowning festival of a queen decades ago. You'll see just how much the competition has changed from then to now. That's coming up when the story returns.
Up next at 6:30, arson in that massive Portland apartment fire with a resident now under arrest. The troubling signs his neighbors say they saw leading up to that blaze. And old tech, new memories, an oh-so-Portland story involving a typewriter store and actor Tom Hanks. Plus your weekend weather outlook minutes away at 6:30. Hope to see you then.
Ah, yes, you know it's summer in Portland when the Rose Festival is back. Tonight is the kickoff City Fair starting up down at the waterfront in downtown Portland. You're looking live out there. You can see lots of folks in shorts and t-shirts because, of course, it's a glorious summer-like day there at City Fair. The Rose Festival organizers are hoping a lot of folks are going to come down and enjoy downtown, ride on some rides, you know, eat the food, check out the performances and exhibits all throughout the fair. And it's just the beginning of Rose Fest. There's dragon boat races and parades and lots of other events planned for the next few weeks. If you've been around for a while, that you know that the Rose Festival is one of Portland's oldest traditions, going back more than 100 years. So, of course, we also have a lot of file footage in the KGW vault. One of the Rose Festival traditions is to crown a Rose Queen. High school girls in Portland are named Rose Princesses, and during the festival, one of them becomes the Queen. The pageant has changed quite a bit over the years, but let's go back in time and take a look at the Rose Queen coronation from 1965.
Rose Festival highlights continue. R.H. Peck here and its coronation night in Rosaria. For the moment, there are 12 princesses. But within a short time, there's only going to be 11 because one of them is going to be chosen to reign over Rosaria for the 1965 Rose Festival. And for the most part will be Portland's Queen of Queens. The anticipation will be over shortly for all but one of those 12 girls. For her, it's just the beginning, and during the next year, her time's going to be taken in representing the City of Roses, greeting visiting dignitaries, and carrying out the official functions of her office. You're listening to the all-high school band set the scene with a medley of songs from Wildcat. As in years past, a packed house here at the Memorial Coliseum this evening. Each of the court have now given their 2-minute talks. They have been reintroduced and are assembled on the huge rotating stage at the center of the Memorial Coliseum. The stage lined with red roses, each princess her own bouquet of a dozen pink roses. The basis for the selection of tonight's queen is as it has been in other years, ladies and gentlemen. The judges have been instructed to judge in appearance up to 40%. Poise up to 40%. And in speaking ability up to 20%. The music for tonight's pageant, if you can hear it in the background, and I doubt very much that you can, is the All-City High School Rose Festival Orchestra under the direction of Mr. A. Vern Wilson. That moment is here, and now here to make the announcement of this year's Queen is Her Royal Highness the 1964 Queen, Queen Sharon.
Festival Queen. Queen Sally.
Sally's the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. E.C. Swift of 9742 North James Street in Portland. And she comes from Roosevelt High School. She enjoys swimming, reading, bowling, and singing. Stands 5'7", weighs 115 pounds with brown hair and blue-green eyes. Princess Sally plans to go to Portland State to major in secondary education and eventually to teach English. Active as well in Red Cross work. Princess Sally.
How about that? Wow, lots of people, seemed like thousands there celebrating that. Well, wherever you are, Ms. Swift, I hope that your reign in Rosaria was enjoyable for you. By the way, the Rose Queen coronation has come a long way since 1965. For one thing, it's no longer about appearance. They don't announce the Queen's height or weight to a huge audience like that. The Rose Festival organizer very clear, it's not a beauty contest, not anymore. Instead of being judged on appearance and poise like they were in '65, the girls now are judged on character, communication, and presence, and a vote from their school. They have to have a high grade point average, GPA, to even apply. They have to be involved in their school. They have to do community service, so it's a lot of difference. The Rose Festival says the court mission is about providing scholarships to outstanding students and to give them networking and mentoring opportunities. That's the end of our show. Before we go, though, yes, we do read your emails, and we saw that I messed up Worcester, Massachusetts. Can't we get a better name? Come on, you guys. I know, it's a great town. I'm sure it is. Anyway, thanks for watching. Remember the story, our story, that never ends. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday. And in the meantime, stick around. The 6:30 news coming up next.